But here is the finished rig with everything kind of working. And what I'm going to do to start off is just delete everything that we don't need. Now, I've already shown you how I set up my structure here. So that we've got the crane arm as the master collection, and then I break it into the two sub collections where we've got the rig in one. So what I'm going to do is actually just delete that rig and start again. Now, I'm going to leave my shapes in here just to speed things up, and I will provide these shapes for you. Now, they won't match up perfectly when I rebuild them, but that's okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is add in an armature, and I'm going to do it single bone, and I can't see anything, so I'm going to go to the Object tab, Viewport Display, turn on my, actually not the names, I want to turn on the wire, and then also in front so we can see through. Then go to the Armature tab and turn on our bones. So Viewport Display, the names and the axes. All right, so I'm going to name this armature off the bat before I even jump into edit mode. So crane arm underscore rig, and I'm only doing one object, so let's just copy and paste this one in there. Oops. Now I've got a .001 on the end because I've just deleted that data and it's still in the memory of Blender, so it's trying to say, oh hey, that name already exists. So that won't be the case for you. Right, so I'm going to start here, jump into side view, turn on my screencast keys, jump into side view in edit mode, and I'm going to rotate this one around, make sure that if we rotate around the active element, it's going to rotate that guy. Press R from the side view, and then 90, enter, and this is going to be our root bone, so let's just scale it bigger. Yeah, that'll do. I'm going to name our bone now. I'm leaving the deform on for now. I'll go through later and I'll turn off all the deforms that I don't want. Okay, so that is that bone done. It's time for our next one. So I'm actually going to use snapping on our rig here to get this working. So I'm going to select one verb and then press L to select the linked ones, making sure that my mouse is hovered over that geometry, because if it's over something else and you push L, it's going to link select. So I just deselected everything there. The L key will select what's under your mouse. Although if you have some selected and then you press Control L, it's going to link select everything that was connected to that selection. But anyway, what I'm going to do, actually I've changed my mind. I'm going to select these two loops. I'm going to put the pivot point for our spin in at the center of those because it's a circle. And then I go Control S and snap my cursor to selection, and you can see that my my cursor is in the spot that I want. Right, back into edit mode for our armature, and I'm just going to duplicate this bone, and grab it and drag it up. And now I'm going to use snapping, so selection to cursor, boom. I'm also going to scale this one down because I don't need it to be so big. Just hold down Control to increment that snapping, because my snapping up here is set to increment. And now let's name this one. So this one's going to be base spin. That's good. Now I'm going to just select the head of our bone here and extrude straight up. And extrude up and then extrude straight out. Now these aren't placed in the right spot, but I'll fix that in just a moment. Now this one's not going to be a control, so I'm going to call it arm01 with lowercase. This one is not going to be a control, so that is arm02. Okay, and now we're going to get about positioning this joint here, the tail slash head, in the correct spot. So I'm going to jump back into edit mode for my mesh and choose the pivot point. So, okay, there's a nice spot. Yeah, so that is the point that I'm going to snap at. So let's just snap my cursor to that, cursor to selected. So my cursor's at that point. Now jump back into edit mode for my armature. And I don't want to snap the whole entire joint to that position. I'm just going to snap one axis at a time. So I can actually do that with scaling. That is one of the many ways I can do this. So that's what I'm going to do in this instance. I only have this joint selected here. So I'm going to make sure, that I scale to the 3D cursor. And then when I scale, I'm only going to constrain it on one axis at a time. So if I hit S and Z or Z, that's going to go up and down. And then if I immediately hit 0 and enter, I have scaled it to the correct height. And now I want to make sure that I'm at the right depth, which is the left and the right. So actually we might already be there, but let's just doubly check. So if I go scale Y 0 and then hit enter, and now that I know it's aligned with that point, which is going to be our pivot point, but it didn't snap all the way over here. If I do that, it's not wrong like that. I'll just undo my explanation there. Let's do a similar thing with the next part here. So jumping to edit mode, yep, this is going to be my the point that I'm going to pivot around. So snap my cursor to that point, cursor to selected. Actually, I'll show you a different way. So I can actually use snapping because it's already in line. Whoops, go back to object mode and then select our armature, back into edit mode. So what I'm going to do is snap this head here to this point, but exclude the z-axis. So I make sure that I change my snapping to vertex. And then let me just show you. I'll move it away so it's in the wrong spot. If I hit G and then hold down Control, it's going to snap to that vertex there, but it's in the wrong height. So I'm going to undo that. If I hit G, I've activated grab mode. And then if I immediately hit Y, it's going to constrain to the Y axis. And then if I hold down Control, it's going to snap to the length of that. And now I'll do it on the other axis. So I hit G and then X and snap it there with holding down Control. And now I know that that tail is in line with that vertex. All right, so that was a long-winded explanation. Now it's time to do our crane clamps. So I'm going to do an extrude, so E, and then constrain with the middle mouse while moving it to the right. Just position it roughly, and then extrude out towards the end. And I am going to hold down the Control to snap it to the end vertex, even though it's not, this end isn't that important, it's the pivot point. Let's fix this pivot point. I'll just have a look in my mesh here. You can see, yes, I'm going to use this point here as the pivot point. So let's do the same thing. I'll just snap my cursor there so you can always see the point that I'm talking about. All right, back to edit mode for my armature. So this is what I'm going to snap. So I'm going to hit G to activate grab mode, and then hit with the left and the right axis, which is the X button. And now hold down Control, and I've snapped it there. And I also want to make sure that I snap it on the Y axis, just in case it's not already there. So G, Y, and then hold down Control. So bang, there we go. So that is in line with our pivot point there. Now I'm going to name these. So let's go, this one is going to be Control. So we're going to call this one clamp underscore O1.L. This one is clamp underscore O2.L. And we're going to mirror these across to the other side when we are done. All right, now I'm going to add our control. That's going to be an IK target. Now I'm going to extrude from this bone here, and then I'll make sure that I want to disconnect the parent, because when I extrude, it's actually going to be already connected to this one, and we know it can't be connected if we want it to act as an IK. So I've just extruded that. Let's rename it. So we're going to just call this one control, CTRL, and now let's just clear the parent for now. So Alt-P, clear parent. So I know that it's disconnected. I also want to look at the roll here. So it should be facing up, but I can see from my roll, it's got a slight angle to it. Now I could hit 0 like that just to zero it out, or I could also reset the roll by hitting Shift N to recalculate roll. It's very similar to recalculate the normals in mesh editing. And then I want the global Z axis to be pointing up, and that would have done the same thing. Actually, I'll just show you. So Shift N, global axis, now it's pointing up. Bang. Now I know this control isn't aligned with the world. It's actually facing, the Y is facing in the wrong direction. Now it's always a nice thing to do, but for this demonstration, I'm going to leave it like this because it's easier to follow along. All right, so the only other bones that we're missing is the closed bone. So I'm going to just duplicate this one here, and from the front view, Shift D, drag it up and middle mouse so that I can constrain it on the Z axis. This is going to be our closed bone. So I'm going to make sure it's got a capital letter, call it close. And I am going to rotate this one around so that it is aligned with the world. And that way, when we move on the positive X, it's going to go towards the right. So I'm going to realign that. Let's just rotate it, rotate around the active element. And then I want it to go 180 degrees. Boom. So it's not actually aligned. You can see our Z axis is pointing off to the right. That's because our roll is 90 degrees. So let's recalculate our roll, and we want the Z axis to be pointing up. Boom. So our Z axis is pointing up. And also let's start with it over in this position so that it has to move to a maximum position over here. So here is off and here is going to be fully on. So let's move it over and let's keep it. I think in my original design, I made that distance 1.5. So let's actually just move it to the left, negative 0.75, which is going to be half that distance. Actually, I haven't drawn it too far off there, but I will get rid of that annotation because it's going to be annoying. So this is almost our structure complete. I'm going to mirror this across with the symmetrize. So there we go. That is now across to the other side. And oh, I'm just missing one control, the one that does the aiming. Should we add that now? Yeah, let's add it now so that we've done all these steps in the one process. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate that control, and then I'm still scaling around the active element. I'm just going to scale it down just so it's a little bit smaller. So S 0.5, and the size doesn't matter. It's just going to be a visual representation for this one, and I want to keep them separate so that we can see them. So this one, I'm going to rename CTRL underscore, oops, let's try that again, F2, CTRL underscore MCH for mechanism. That's going to be my mechanism bone. And while we're here, I'm going to start the parenting. So this mechanism bone needs to be parented to this control bone. So Control P, keep offset. Now the first clamp, both sides, needs to also be parented to this mechanism bone. So I'm just going to hide this for now. Select both of our clamps and then select this one, Control P, keep offset. Now I'll unhide that bone. This one is already connected. This one needs to be parented to this guy, Control P, keep offset. And the base spin needs to be parented to the root. And also our control, the main control needs to be parented to the root. And I think the only one that I haven't parented is this close. And I also want this one to be parented to the mechanism bone. Now the reason I'm not parenting it to the control bone here, and that is because this mechanism bone is always going to orient itself to this arm, whereas the control bone is only going to look like it's oriented towards the arm when it's actually not. So I actually want this bone to follow along with the rotations. So I'm going to select that one, then, oh, and when the bones are difficult to select like that, I'm going to change into debone mode. And now anything that's bigger in the same spot, you can just scale down. So now you can easily select them like that. I'm going to parent this closed bone to our mechanism bone. Control P, and then keep offset. So that is all the structure done. Let's save our work.